How does Delhi match up to Mumbai when it comes to women's safety? The answer may seem obvious, but as always, it lies in the numbers. We're bringing the oldest fight in India to you, Delhi versus Mumbai. I'm Anjali Thomas, a Mumbaia at heart and a deputy editor of ground reports with ThePrint. And with me is my colleague Tina Das, a senior correspondent and Dil Se Dilliwali. Welcome to the Mumbai-Delhi Express podcast, and we're going to discuss women's safety.
I think it's kind of obvious and sad, unfortunately, that I've spent like 14 years in Delhi, and there are these strategies that I have adopted over time to survive in the city as a woman.
Like?
For example, if it is a particular time of the day or night, primarily night, of course, days when it's very early in the morning. So I'll consciously not go out too early in the morning for, let's say, a jog or a run,
All
unless
right.
it's within like gated societies and stuff. I'll probably not go on certain roads. And also, of course, there's also the weather to contribute to the situation, because in winters the fog is so dense and bad that you really can't spot people like even 100 meters away. So it feels like the possibility of something happening to you, not, I mean, as an individual, yes, but also as a woman, feels too high for me to like even make that attempt or take that risk, for example. Or if I'm out at night, I think I'm very, very conscious of the fact that even if I'm walking on the road, and even if it's a well-lit road, if it's less traffic and all, if there's, somebody slowing down, a vehicle is slowing down, I think the alert is at maximum and more when it's in Delhi. And I have not experienced that back where I'm from. And I only realized the contrast.
And you're from
And
Assam?
I'm from Assam. And I've grown up in a small town, but now my parents live in Guwahati, which is also a fairly big town. I'm not saying that there's, of course, no crime there. I mean, there's this also false assumption that just because it's Northeast and it's a relatively better space for women, there are no crimes. It's nothing like that. Of course, there are horrific crimes which have happened also in Guwahati. But at least that the tense behavior that I have, which has become a norm right now, goes down significantly, even if I'm walking in the dark.
So before we take this forward, I just pulled up some NCRB data. So I'm going to just like throw that data. And I think the nation collectively needs to hang its head in shame. Yes, Delhi is more unsafe than Bombay, but data shows, the latest data, which is for 2022, shows that there were 456,256 cases of crime against women in 2022. This means 51 FIRs every hour. In that, Delhi registered the highest number of cases of crimes against women, which is 14,158. And Bombay was a very low 6,176 cases. This includes everything, like, abuse at home, everything. So, but this kind of also speaks to the safety of women. And yes, the perception is, and the truth is, that Bombay is safer than Delhi. But I don't think it's because the men are any better in one city than the other. I think there's just less opportunity in Bombay. It's a very, very crowded city. It's a very dense city. There are people sleeping on pavements. Somebody's always working. It's a city with a strong work culture. So even at 1 o'clock, you're going to be stuck in a traffic jam because somebody's heading to work. And all these things together, and also we have less open spaces than Delhi does. We don't have the kind of parks or the gardens or the empty spaces that you see in Delhi. And I think all this collectively has helped make Bombay, and its robust public transport system has helped make Bombay a safer city for women. That's at least my take on it. But you've also partied in Bombay, lived in Bombay, visited the city. What's different?
I think it's a lot to do with, yes, I agree. There's always people around no matter where you
Yeah.
are. One of the things I think is because there is the perception already, like even before you probably visit Bombay, you have that perception it's a relatively safe city. So I think my guard was down slightly, if not more. And also because when I remember going for the first time, I remember I was sitting in Marine Drive. I was supremely crowded. And there was a man sitting on my right. It's a stranger. And then there's a woman sitting on his right or something. And then my friend on the left. And I was eating something. Raw mango, which is one of my
Oh,
favorite things to
kachakari.
eat. And this person who basically suddenly out of nowhere, and if it was Delhi, I would like probably just throw it at his face and start running away. Maybe.
What did he do?
So he just basically leaned in, not in a bad, like weird way. because I was looking the other side. He said, "Madam, iska taste kaisa hai?" And I was so taken aback by the question. I said, "Acha." He's like, "Ek piece can I take? मतलब खा के देखूं मैं." So I gave it, of course. So he took it. He gave a bite and he gave it to the woman next to him, which I just noticed, right? And then he bought from the seller. So that was like a most normal interaction with somebody who's completely a stranger. Probably we all belong to a different
Yeah.
class, community, whatever that I have had. And in such a space where I'm already sitting between two men, I would not even imagine that in Delhi without anticipating some shit to go wrong, I think.
So everyone says that Bombay is freer, and in many ways, I took that for granted. Though I still think that we have a long way to go. Even Mumbai is a long way to go for women's safety. But it didn't hit me until many years later. We were at a conference in Goa, some work-related conference, and a colleague and I were booked on an early morning flight from Goa back to Bombay. So it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were alone with this driver on this dark, deserted road. And I'm sitting there and be like, "Oh, this is beautiful." You could see the trees, the narrow lanes. There's no light. There's very little light. I was like, "This is amazing. This is beautiful." And wow, I could just like walk down this road. And this woman who was from Delhi, looked at that and she was terrified. She's like, oh my God, there is no one here. Anything can happen. Who is this driver? We should have asked for a security guard. And I think at that moment, it hit me that I was in many ways fortunate to have grown up and to have in Bombay, to have partied in Bombay, to have had taxi drivers drop me home drunk somehow and made sure I reached home, even though they didn't know who I was. They would find my cell, call up somebody. I think I had that luxury, which I didn't realize then. It is a privilege in India, which it shouldn't be. Everyone should have access to space at whatever time of the night. We should not be judged by what we wear, how we behave. But yeah, Bombay afforded that privilege. And today I like Delhi. I like living in Delhi, but that's also because I'm home by 10:30. I'm at bed by 11:30. I'm not out partying, getting drunk. Those days are, behind me. I did that in Bombay.
I wouldn't say that it has never happened to me in the days where I had been living. I mean, I used to live alone, and then from CP, for example, I've booked an auto or not booked an auto, taken an auto where we were standing, and I've fallen asleep because maybe I was high or whatever. And I have arrived, and all I have told this auto, I remember that incident really well because I've told this auto wala ki I live in this particular area. I haven't really mentioned house number and all. My thought was once we get closer, reach closer, I will let him know. Except I fell asleep, of course, unwittingly. And I think I only woke up when probably there was a speed breaker and it sort of jerked. And I was very close to the area that I live in. And he's like, I was just about to wake you up, ma'am. We've reached, but I don't know where to go. Now, of course, there was relief, but also there was this, immediately I was scolding myself. How could I have fallen asleep?
Yeah.
And this is risky. This is
And
Delhi.
that happens with us too. It's not like, in Bombay you do that.
Yeah, but, I'm not saying those have never happened, that I have not reached safely on the days where, like my body has given up. I'm just too tired to be vigilant enough. And it's a 1-hour commute. But I'm saying those are exceptions as opposed to norms. And I have, of course, experienced that in Bombay. And it's not something that I will base only on my experience. I have friends who've lived in Delhi and who've shifted to Bombay. I remember this one particular conversation. I think the last time I went, this woman who shifted to Bombay for work, and she's lived in Delhi all her life. And she and I had finished dinner at this particular restaurant, and the shops and all are all closed now. It's around 11. And we cracked a joke, but unfortunately, it's not even a joke. It's sad that it's a joke, but I said, do you want to take a walk? And it's 11:30. And she's like, yeah, of course, it's Bombay, it's not Delhi, so we can afford to take a walk. And the first thing is not like the moment you come out of the restaurant, you're like, we'll book. We have to wait till both the autos come together. Only then we can leave, because you can't leave a woman behind.
Having said that, I think one of the reasons is that Bombay has a history. What is Delhi at the end of the day? Most of the jobs before, it were either academia or government. People are home by 6:37. Bombay, on the other hand, it is a culture where people are working continuously. There are shifts, there are factories, and it also has a history of women out working, not gallivanting, nothing. Women out occupying public spaces, taking public transport, in a bus where, squeezed in a jam packed bus, jumping onto trains. Yes, we have a women's compartment, but we also have the general compartment. And at night in Delhi, in Bombay, after a certain period of, I think, after a certain time, the women's compartment becomes a general compartment. So we have that history of women working, women occupying public spaces, which has also helped. So it is very difficult for somebody to attack a woman in Bombay and get away with it, because of the crowds, because of the people, because of the work shifts, because somebody is always out. At 2 o'clock, you'll have somebody coming and saying chai, chai on the, or, on the roads in Bombay, or anda pav. There's always someone working. And I think that has helped. But if you look at Bombay's history of crimes against women, those that have happened in isolated places. I mean, yes, there's Shakti mills, but there are also cases of, women being roofied. If people can get away with it, they're going to do it. I sometimes, maybe I'm cynical, but that's what I feel.
But that is true, especially more on Delhi,
Because you'll have more spaces and people are still home by 6:30, by 7:30. You're not going to get the kind of traffic that you get in Bombay.
actually, taking on from what you said, I think this is a line. This is actually one of the opening voiceovers from this movie called No One Killed Jessica years ago that I watched by myself in a hall. And it opens by Rani Mukherjee's voiceover saying that Delhi is all about power. And that line has stuck with me all these years because I feel like what you said about getting away with often comes from that element of I have power. I know somebody who knows somebody in power. If I'm not probably a person of power, I'll know somebody who knows somebody. Think of it, from Supreme Court to bureaucracy to, a lot of the richest people live in Delhi, or they have connections, like some of the biggest businesses, originally, which have now spread over, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of access, and they have a lot of power sharing. So what often happens with the getting away is not simply that somebody will see and you'll get away. It's also because even if I get into, a situation where I'm arrested or, I'm found out, I have the power somehow to get out of the situation because I know somebody. I'm not saying that Bombay does not have powerful people. I'm not saying all of that.
I get what you're saying.
But this is that attitude where I can get away with it because I have power is very, very strong in Delhi, even in the language, even the way people interact with each other. And it starts right from, the commute. In the sense like, for example, one of the examples that we give a lot, which you already mentioned, that, you sit in a Bombay auto, you're safe. You cannot say the same thing about sitting in a Delhi auto late at night or whatever time at night, I think right from there it starts. Like people see somebody else saying, you don't know who my father is, sort of a thing. But everybody knows that they can get away with it because there's also power there. Not simply just isolated spaces or non-isolated spaces.
And another thing which just occurred to me during this conversation is that Delhi also seems to be a city, and I include Noida and Gurgaon in this, where there are a lot of gated societies. Bombay is getting there. But for a long time, some of the most expensive real estate in Bombay still had like a slum next to it. This concept of being gated and doing everything within the safe space didn't really exist. So do you think that that is one? And before this podcast, we were having this conversation of work culture in Delhi and how it started only with Noida and Gurgaon. You were mentioning something on that?
Yeah, because I'm not saying, of course, jobs did not exist before.
No, kind of jobs.
So, see, one thing was there that, for example, there was always Delhi University, which is like the oldest and where people congregate from all over. Right. For example, it has one of the maximum probably concentration of people from Northeast. Yeah. Because, of course, in higher institution with, subsidized fees. But even back then, when my sister was studying back in early 2000, she would say that by 7, like all the hostels, of course, had the rule by 7:30. But there were horrific rape cases that happened, even while she was studying. And, she would write letters, we would exchange letters and all. And even though you had such a vibrant student population, you would think there'll be people milling around. It was almost an unspoken rule that if you're a female student, 7 is the extreme deadline. It's not even. So imagine a city which shuts down already for women at 7, and you pointed out. The other point is the corporate culture of course, came with Noida, with Gurgaon.
But are those cities safer?
I mean, probably relatively for some reasons. I'm not saying, of course, either of those spaces are safe, but I think at least people are more used to seeing people coming home late.
I think we
Relatively.
need more women in the workforce. We need more women occupying and traveling and commuting and taking over spaces that are gendered. And but again, I was again going through data, and it shows again NCRB data shows that posh well, in the workplace as well, sexual harassment has increased. It's increased by I don't know how much, but it's increased from 402 in 2018 to 422 in 2022, and this is just cases that we know, that cases that have been reported. So I think in both cities or in any city in India, a woman, no matter, has to always be alert, whether she's in the workplace, whether she's traveling, whether she's at home. They just have to be alert all the time.
And I mean, of course, that's true. And the other point is that at least now, like 10 years from this one incident where I was groped, I remember, at least the PCR.
Oh, I was groped in Bombay as well.
Yeah, so this
many
is what-
times.
So this is the thing. Like when we imagine, like for women, I think there's no safe space. That's the problem.
But what
It's
did
an
you do
illusion.
here when I was groped and I was with my friends and I'd be like, somebody groped me, they'd immediately stop and they would be like yelling, who did this, like, and people would just pretend as if we were the crazy ones. But we would stop and we would make a scene, and then other women would come or other people would come, and then they would try to identify who it was. I was groped, when there was a rush to a popcorn stand at, I think, Eros or Sterling Cinema, and we were all there and somebody groped me. I've been groped in a bus because it was so crowded. And you can discern a grope from just, somebody being shoved into your face, which is what Bombay's commute is all about. It's not like it didn't happen. So we made noise. We yelled. We shouted. What's the scene here?
I think creating a scene becomes a big issue because I remember I was by myself. This was right before trying to get into MA. I was coming baback from Green Park metro station. Now, it's a relatively elite area.
Yes.
And right outside there's a lot of hustle and bustle because a lot of banks are there. So, if you get out of the exit and a few, like 1 kilometer away, there's NIFT. So it's an area which is not like secluded. It was not at night. It was 3 p.m. on a summer afternoon. So there were enough people.
Yeah.
So I think my shock, of course, at this person, his hands coming from behind and sort of holding me, is not just at the fact that it's broad daylight. Of course, you've heard, before you come to Delhi, your parents sit down and warn you. But the fact that when it was done, and this was some homeless person who was basically probably not in his right mental state as well, I'm not sure anymore. But, at that point, you're shivering and trying to figure out to call police and all of it. There were just 2 other people. There was a young guy and probably his friend or girlfriend who were probably NIFT students who were on the other side of the road. So it's a girl who spotted what had happened and she yelled and they came running. But there were a lot of other people around. They're always usually drivers because their cars,
nobody stops.
Nobody stops. So even when I called the police or those people were trying to help me, I just decided to go to my PG instead of waiting around because I don't know when the police is going to come. Do I want to risk standing there knowing nobody has anyway helped? And these were my age. Like, my whole point is how much can they
also
help or save me, right? Whenever people around, it's a crowded, like I said, it's a crowded thing. Nobody even bats an eyelid.
Yeah.
At an incident, I'm on a footpath. I'm not even in some
and
corner.
When you make a noise, most people look at you as if you're the crazy one.
You're a problem.
Like you're the problematic one for doing that. That happens everywhere.
So, and that teaches you, you can't assume. I think that was my lesson, like a very unfortunate, pertinent lesson that you can't assume some space is safe because it's broad daylight, because it's some elite space, because it was all of that, right? I said, 3 p.m. summer.
Definitely on the elite. I have felt most unsafe in very elite neighborhoods in Bombay, like Juhutara Road, if I'm walking alone there at 1-2. And this was when I was young. I don't know what it's like now because there was nobody. There were just people in their cars driving around. And as you mentioned, when the cars stop, you automatically become very alert, So it's not that all of Bombay, some of the safest places in Bombay have been in the most crowded areas, in the heart of Sitla Devi, in Dadar. I've felt safe there. So,
I think we can just conclude with the fact that as it is, it should not be a privilege. It should not be
it should be a
on women
right.
and young girls being taught, stringent rules of do's, don't do's. And, one of my most heartbreaking moments was probably when I was teaching in like 2, 3 girls' colleges. And in a discussion, they were mentioning instances probably on the way to the college commute where they have been, harassed or groped or have faced something. That made me even more angry because, of course, you're angry about what happens to you.
Oh,
But
yeah.
then 7, 8 years later, when you're teaching somebody who's that age that you were in when you were probably harassed, it makes you more angry because what you realize is A, nothing has changed. B, you probably understand better their mindset because they froze, they did not call out. Because one of the things that people often like to comment on social media is, why didn't you ask for help, why didn't you do this. Sometimes people in uniform say horrible things to you when you try and
Oh, yeah.
go and ask for help.
And I think I want to conclude by saying that at least with this topic, it goes beyond which city is better, whether Bombay is a little less safer, a little more safer than Delhi, or vice versa. Women should be safe everywhere. It's our right.